Right. Now, for those of you who have energy, you can hang out here, open a can of your favorite or pour a glass of whatever. We're just going to throw open the chance for some closing reflections. I've asked Anna to kick off with a couple of minutes max, just what's top of mind for her, because she didn't actually give a talk, and then we'll just throw it open, and you can post a question in the Q&A button as well if you want to. So, Anna, what's top of mind for you?
I have so many questions. This has been such an amazing panel. So I really thank all the presenters for so many interesting similar and ideas and questions. So one thing I think I realized is that as a community, if these things, ought to go on, as I hope, we really need to think about a definition of collective intelligence. I think at the beginning, I think it was in the keynote, it was introduced as an emergent capacity of people working together to solve problems. But then over the various presentation and reading in the chat, I wasn't really sure that's the case. Is it that the case that collective intelligence emerges only around solving complex problems, or is rather a much more, emergent phenomenon? And that lead me to another key question that was also raised in the chat. But if that is true, is collective intelligence an emergent phenomenon? And if it is an emergent phenomenon, can we drive it in any way? I mean, what is the role of agency? Can we even design for it? Can we say, oh, I have a group of 50 people, and now I would like to have them collectively intelligent make that pathway. So I think that we have to question ourselves around this. I mean, I don't know. I can, open up the discussion around this. Do you think that collective intelligence is an emergent phenomenon? And in what way and to what extent can we drive it in a purposeful way and toward a purposeful direction? For example, solving and tackling the biggest problem of our time.
Very, very nice question, Anna. You don't pull levers and change complex systems and control emergent phenomena, but there are potentially ways of shaping it. Okay, let's throw it right open. Just put your Zoom hand up to join the queue, and Marc-Antoine is up there first. Oh, do I need to? I'm going to have to ask you to unmute. Sorry. There we go.
No, great question. We're having this discussion also in the chat. Is all collective cognition collective intelligence? I think it's absolutely true that, yes, collective cognition is an emergent thing. Of course, we can try to shape it. May not work because emergence is not, controllable thing. I would like to distinguish collective cognition from collective intelligence in a more deliberative sense. Maybe it's one narrow definition. I'm not saying it's universal, but there is something where we think as a group and evaluate one another's ideas and try to combine them to arrive at a better collective understanding. And I think this is distinct than the mob reactions that have been mentioned often. And the purposiveness, deliberativeness, and agreement between what we thought about and the results of our actions, these are, for me, distinctive features. Is it something we can reason together about? And the discursive part is part of what I like to think as collective intelligence. Now, collective cognition is much broader. Stigmergy is collective cognition. It's important. And yes, sometimes it's worth shaping that. but I'd like us to make that distinction. Over.
Okay, thanks. Collective emergency, like for what purposes, seem to be what you're saying there, which is back to the whole moral question, the question of the distinction Doug was making between civic intelligence, which values civic values, versus collective intelligence that can be used for all sorts of nefarious ends. John.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I came up with the term architecture, because I think they are entirely distinguishable. I think that we can the collective part of collective intelligence is to do with that collecting signals of one form or another from other people, doing some kind of processing, whether it's in your head or on a machine, and then presenting the results back to that crowd. That's the collective part. The intelligence part may involve many other bits of the architecture. So I think that's and you totally can shape the collective. I mean, that's what my PhD was all about. It was about shaping collective behaviors so that they resulted in something that was like a teacher. But when I came up with a set of principles that applied to it, there were all sorts of things like pedagogical intent of the participants, like the surrounding social structures and the surrounding processes and organizational structures and all of those things. So I think if we're looking for collective intelligence, it's important to separate out the collective part, because that is emergent. And it isn't something, it is something you can influence. It's not something you can control, unless you're Mark Zuckerberg, in which case, I mean, Facebook's got it down really well. I mean, in a terrible, terrible way. But that, you know, that's they know how to manipulate that crowd. But yeah, I mean, keep these things separate: collective and intelligence. What makes it intelligence?
I still find that I don't understand where the line is between the intention, you know. I don't know where a lot of these things, both positive and negative, to what extent they are intentional and to what extent they are emerging. And I think it's an important question, because then if we assume then that collective intelligence can be shaped, can be driven toward a direction. If we say, you know, this symposium is about educating for collective intelligence. So if we accept that collective intelligence is not per se something that will lay collectively positive outcomes, you know, can be driven or can emerge as good or bad, then is a part of the collective educating for collective intelligence, also equipping, you know, like the collective to understand how, you know, collective intelligence can go wrong. So in a way, going back to Zach's presentation, perhaps when we joined this symposium, we had, without realizing, we gave a positive understanding to the collective intelligence in general as a phenomenon, while in reality, it's not necessarily so. And therefore, isn't that an important part of educating for CI, also looking at this aspect? You know, I don't know, it's just keep with the provocation, but I think Rupert was next. I don't know, Simon, you are facilitating.
Yeah, Rupert, form me an orderly queue in the top left corner of my window.
Oh, great. Yeah. I think there's been a bit of a problem with the word intelligence, which various people in the field have pointed out. I think in the original Indo-European language, it was basically the skill of saying the right thing at the right time. It's associated with wisdom, and these sort of concepts emerge from nature on the lines of, you know, what contributes to flourishing. And of course, people make mistakes, but part of intelligence is reflecting and moving towards the common good. So this has now become, as Sternberg talks about, this concept of wisdom, or also as John Vervaeke in Toronto. I think that, you know, intelligence has become fragmented off from a broader stream, which is really about collective reflection, seeking the common good, and obviously not always getting it right. But where would this separate agency come from? Agency always comes from these replicating loops. It's always an emergent phenomenon. And I think it's kind of fascinating to think about the larger concept, which John was pointing out about stigmergy being more systemic and different from intelligence. So perhaps we have a very limited freedom, a very limited agency, but we can design the context for the future emergence of agency. I'm talking too long now, but I was strangely inspired by B.F. Skinner. He used to be a bête noire, but if you read Walden 2, you get this group of people in a utopia, and they're kind of designing their own collective conditioning. And I think that's kind of where we are, isn't it? We can design the context for future intelligent emergence, which might or might not happen because it's not, you know, linear. But anyway, so there's an interesting loop there, isn't there, between the intelligence, conscious intelligence bit and the larger context of that, which we can't be aware of fully, but we can in a way design to some extent. That makes sense.
Yep.
Thanks, Rupert. I want to make sure we talk about education a bit as well. We are very wrapped up around what we mean by CI. So just put your hats on thinking about that. Mike, next to you.
Okay, yeah. Collective intelligence and moving to education, as you said, Simon. Okay, so first off, I would say that collective intelligence is certainly an emerging phenomenon. If we think of it from a systems perspective, it is a process of emergence. And, you know, if we think about living systems, they're self-organizing systems. And that self-organizing capacity, of course, is central to adaptation and survival. But I'm reminded also that it's not a simple either or. Think of Donella Meadows' book, Thinking in Systems, and she talks about sustainability quite a lot. And she talks about how the self-organizing properties of systems are so central to their resilience. But she says that central to the resilience and sustainability of systems also is the goals that they pursue. So a self-organizing system, of course, can select goals to pursue. And those goals are very important for its survival and its well-being and sustainability. So we have this capacity, of course, to, as Rupert says, design. We have this capacity, as has been said, to select goals. Donella Meadows, for example, talks about sustainability and well-being and the goals that have been traditionally selected as critical at a societal level, whereby the priorities on the measurement and goal pursuit of GDP as the predominant goal that we're pursuing and as our predominant definition of well-being. And she says we need to identify other goals and pursue other goals if we're to actually survive as a species. So the singular pursuit of GDP is a problematic goal. So clarifying our goals is important. And I think that, you know, part of our goal here is to design collective intelligence systems where part of what we're doing is we're prioritizing the selection of goals. And it manifests, has been said, in a civic context. It manifests in a workplace context, a practice context. All of those things are really critical and really important. And of course, the infrastructure that we design around how it is we cultivate the skills, collaborative skills, they're all open for selection as goals too. So there's a lot of discrete goals that we need to select and be very careful to think about clearly together in the design process. And it comes back a little bit to Zach's point around some of the threats, that if we're not careful in our selection of goals and in our thinking through what it is we want to achieve together, you know, there's dangers and there's risks around issues of passing over our shared responsibility to machine-based algorithms. There's risks in terms of people not assimilating, acquiring knowledge for themselves and passing over knowledge to completely external sources and relying exclusively on external sources for their knowledge. There's a lot of risks that are there, but a lot of it comes down to the goals that we select that inform the designs that we then implement, evaluate, and test. So I don't think it's an either or. I think collective intelligence is both an emergent phenomenon, but it's also part of that emergent phenomenon is our capacity to identify goals and to design around those goals and to shape the course of our own self-organizing, emerging collective process as a civilization.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Unless anybody wants to jump on that, I'll move to Mohammed. Welcome, Mohammed.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm from UNSW. I'm your neighbor. Yeah. Let's talk about a bit about education for collective intelligence. I just wanted to shortly draw attention to this literature and how it can be more significant in dialogue with the literature on nihilism, actually. Yeah. So there's a book, and there's a whole literature around nihilism, and there's a particular book I will write in the chat by Nolan Geertz that like conceptualize nihilism and having like no foundation, and how it is a threat for humanity, and like falling to this or that easily. Like very simply, if I want to like at the forefront of it, not the thing that nothing matters. And collective intelligence can be a very powerful response to that. And it's about identity formation, but I think education for collective intelligence will be more about the passages, the mechanisms, the education about like shaping identity through not like the end product, but like the process that we relate, and the process that an individual with its whole system of meaning and allegories can relate to another. And I think Rupert Vegerief did a magnificent job about like having ground rules for dialogue and how to like shape a dialogue and with the mechanisms. But yeah, just that, and yeah, just a comment, and we can explore that more. Yeah, I think.
Mohammed. How interesting. I mean, antidotes to nihilism, purpose, choosing hope, which is not feeling optimistic necessarily, but choosing hope, having a sense of identity in a group of people where you are actually making a difference. Locally, we all have limited spheres of influence, right? But the sense that you can actually make a difference for the better, maybe an antidote to that.
Yeah.
We may need to move to Margaret to have the final word. But thank you, Mohammed. Do please drop something in the chat on that.
So I think it's really interesting on the back of Mohammed's talk, and what I've heard today is one of the things that educational ways forward is, I mean, I think that I'm going to go to higher ed now because that's where I sit a lot of the time, not in the workplace, but to say that I think that the actual debate we're having now would be of extraordinary interest to many of our students. We've talked a bit about learning by experience, but I actually think that folk get really interested in what it means to be human. I mean, you know, I'm doing some work in philosophy at the moment. All these students saying, oh, I picked up philosophy because I love it. I mean, that's why people do philosophy. They say it's not going to, they say these things like, it's not going to lead me to a job. It has absolutely no value, but I'm doing it for me. And there are a lot of people who enroll in our institution to do those sorts of things and to expand themselves. And so I think that foregrounding this conversation, which we're also thoroughly engaged in, I think would be great for our students.
Thank you, Margaret. Oh, Mohammed, did you want to come back on that quickly, or have you just accidentally still got your hand up? Okay. All right. Hey, folks, it's 10:30 a.m. here, and it's 11:30 p.m. in Europe with some of our speakers. I think we should wrap this up. I think we should give ourselves a round of applause for the quality
And we
of
give a
conversation.
bigger applause to Simon, who really put together an amazing crowd. Thank you, Simon. It was
Thank you, Anna.
amazing. Thanks.
Very kind, but this has been a collective effort, of course. This could go so many places next. I don't even want to begin to. Oh, Doug, you've got your hand up. Oh, you're muted. Do I need to unmute you? Yes, I do. Maybe. Go.
I guess I was hoping that we would say something about what we might do in the future and not debate on the, I mean, I was part of the debate on what the terms mean, etc. But, you know, one thing you mentioned on the chat was that we could look into sort of a pattern language that could, you know, help bring the community sort of together on a common goal and to sort of maybe, you know, help us articulate some of the values, etc., or you know, follow-on meeting, or Anna had talked about revisiting our list. I guess we had 100 people. I forgot all about it, but you know, can't blame the cold on that. But you know, having that list at least come back alive or something. I wouldn't say I would hate to leave right here without saying something about, but I guess I'm the only one in a reasonable time zone still.
Yeah, Doug, my enthusiasm to wrap things up is simply human survival in Europe.
Simon, I hear you're saying.
But I absolutely want to continue that conversation for sure. And thank you for urging us not to just get hung up on the fascinating definitional issues, etc. I think we're all here because we actually want to see this stuff make a difference. And there is a clock ticking. There is a very loud clock ticking in the ecosystem around those planetary boundaries and all the rest of it. So fascinating as our conversations are academically and intellectually, there is so much work to do. And I think that's part of the DNA of this group. And I just look forward to us trying to figure out what we might do next. Okay. I do want to say, oh, and a final word.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to raise an idea, which I don't know if this can be something some of you want to explore, but it is an issue that we are distributed all around the world and we want to do something together. And it's also true that, you know, I've been working on this field for quite some time, and now I happen to realize you guys have been working on a parallel, you know, dimension for 10, 20 years. This means that this field is not evolving perhaps rapidly as we could if we were working more efficiently together. So when I think about how does that happen, that there is really like a research shift into a field, well, usually through having cohorts of students that can work for a longer period of time into joint research project. So I don't know what you think about it, but we are considering with other partners to seek EU funding for perhaps a relevant topic that could involve this for basically Marie Curie funding that would fund 50 PhD students and for I think 5 years, and Marie Curie funding for PhD students could be awarded to institution everywhere in the world, not just in Europe. So one idea, together with the special issue idea that Rupert said, and many more events like this, could be that we work together towards setting up a joint research center, international, like kind of research network, in which we can fund a set of PhD students that really advance the field. This is not going to be something that can happen in a day, even if we write one grant, it would take like a few months, and maybe 2 years if we're lucky. But I think that would be a good way to really move this group and this research field faster forward. So I would just to
Thanks, Anna. Yeah,
throw this idea.
That's a super exciting idea. It will, doing this in our spare time is going to make very slow progress. And those kinds of large scale visions are very exciting. So yeah, let's move that one forward if we can. Okay. Everybody, head for bed, head for lunch, whatever you're doing next. But thank you so much for coming. This has been a joy. And let's see where we can take this next.
Thanks for putting this all together.
My pleasure.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, especially Simon. Thanks.
Thanks all.